Before the internet became centralized, you could find anything online. There wasn't anyone monitoring the sites you explored and no social media yet. Everything from games to illegal activities could be found easily online back then. It was all only a few clicks away. It could be considered the Wild West or freedom era of the internet. But when people are completely unmonitored, there's no telling what you'll find. Going online could lead you to anything you could want to find, even to things you didn't want to find. This is where we find ourselves today, at a website called deathandhell.com. It's not very often that you find a personal website that has this much effort put into it. Deathandhell.com was created by a man who seems to have some very dark interests. This is evident with the landing page of the website. This is the first page you'll see when you access the website. Already we can surmise that there will be some religious themes as we explore. Skeletons are hung upon crosses, 5 to be exact. A crow sits atop at least 2 of these structures. Their significance beyond death is unknown at this time. Below this is a lengthy introduction to the website. In the 18 months before my death, I proceeded to set forth the keys to death and hell. In this process, I envisioned a snapshot of the world as it appeared to me at the time. Literally a cut and paste sculpture taken from various articles, science fiction, cultural, and political events, happenings in the realms of a culture, flame wars on the Z list, my life, my world, my email, etc. So it was just a cut-up of these things. Somehow, from this cut-up leaked out the most beautiful vision of infinite compassion, and this vision came forth and stood forth even amongst all the horror. It shone through so bright. Really true and undeniably real. There was more compassion and love for me than I'd ever dreamed or imagined. It was like a garden of paradise all around me, blooming with beauty and love. It was there all the time, this unbelievable garden, and it opened up to me. My life has been like heaven in so many ways. I am grateful I had an opportunity to see this possibility, and I want to share it with my fellow sentient beings. Even though death and hell may look like it is all dark, all black, and all horror, right there, glimmering on the other side is infinite compassion. Right there. The clear light is shimmering through the void. It's not that hard to see if you just open your eyes and look around. My life with Andrea, Agate, and the love that we were reflecting back and forth between each other is so magnificent and powerful that it's like we were facing death every day. Celebrating our love every day. We were facing it because that was the way we lived. But for me, maybe it took the imminence of physical death to bring it to full clarity. As my own death approaches steadily, I am blessed and deeply moved by the enormous display of affection and love for my daughter Heidi. Heidi's love is a limitless ocean that has healed me so much from the pain of life. Though she is young, 17, and losing her dad, she shows all the signs of blooming into a spectacular woman of insight and compassion. I am surprised and grateful for the outpouring of tenderness. Seeing those around me, especially my only child, offering me such unconditional love and compassion changes me, heals me, and reaffirms the silent knowledge of my heart. When my sister Lori died, she gave me a greater understanding of death, and the communiques or transmissions that I received from her, and my grandmother too, reveal much about the after-death state. Though my heart touches many who are in this life still, it reaches out across the boundaries to touch those who have gone before me. Their bravery fuels my own. It is in their path of stars and ghostly footsteps that I will walk in. These are the gifts that I take with me. I will go caressed by the kisses of Nuit. I face death without fear. I leave for this world the keys of death and hell to unlock the secrets we keep from ourselves. But for any who would wonder or wander lost in Temple Dahmer, I want to declare that the real secret of deathandhell.com is infinite compassion. Those who know will know. The archetypal theoromorph is in the lotus. In eternal love and chaos, Infek Bin Laden, 11/11/01. This is the opening to the website. There's a lot here that Infek has said. He's a man who is dying. Facing the end of times, he has decided to collect all that he has and put it into this website. We don't know yet what that means, but from this reading, it feels like we're looking into the darkness and he expects us to see the light on the other side. There's more here. The name of this man, which is an online alias, is Infek Bin Laden, just like the man who led the terrorist group. Though it is stated that he held the name before 9/11, it is unknown why he decided to keep it. Well, all that's left to do is enter the website. Let's begin our descent. We are greeted by an inverted pentagram with the words, "The keys to death and hell," written on it. Surrounding the occult symbol are 25 boxes with images in them. 15 boxes are also left completely empty. Maybe he didn't have the time to fill them all in, or maybe he wanted them to appear this way. Each thumbnail takes us to a different section of the website. With 25, there's a lot to get lost in here. We will start at the top and note anything interesting found while exploring. The first image is named Puppet Master Sorcery. The image is of a vaguely humanoid, decomposing body, or maybe it is a puppet. This should give us some insight into what we are diving into. Clicking again takes us to this. There are a few articles to read through here, so let's start at the top. The title of this article is Puppet Master Sorcery, the single greatest threat. Threat to what exactly? We'll need to continue reading to hopefully find out. Belief is the single greatest threat to our species. We cannot maintain belief and survive as intelligent life. I woke up one day, feeling the sinister urge to dig up a corpse and mutilate it. I gathered a small crowbar, a pair of pliers, a screwdriver, black candles, and a pair of surgical gloves in my backpack. These are the opening set of quotes before we begin. No one is listed as being quoted here, yet it is a quote. Continuing through the article is like reading a messy jumble of incomplete thoughts. Most of what this article refers to is something that I can't even say on YouTube. The gist of it, and the parts that hold interest, is that a few cults exist. One is called the Church of Dahmer, and the other is called the Sects of Latter-day Satanism. Both of these cults might even just be the same but with different names. Neither of these cults exists, like a lot of the other terms we're going to hear. There's talk of something called a hot vessel cadaver and something called OV. Every time either of these is mentioned, there's a trademark placed after them. Though I searched for them both and found nothing. I suspect that they might be words used to replace what is actually being said, like a code of sorts. The 3 articles on this page are all about necrophilia. They discuss how to do it and how to find yourself an unwilling participant. There's more here, talking about magicians and the like, but most of it is, again, something I can't say on YouTube. More so, it's something that carries a lot of disgusting ideas. Each article contains these topics. The 3 might as well be one article. The first sets up the stage, and it gets worse with each new entry. The puppets here are the cadavers, it seems. The whole thing is grotesque and morbid. This is the precedent that this site is setting up. These are not just the ramblings of a man about to die. They are the festering ideas of an individual who wanted to get under everyone's skin. Let's continue to our next section. Murder, Death, and Insanity is the next section. At the top is a banner of a dead person. I can't tell if it's fake, but I assume it is. Below we have 4 articles to sift through. The first is titled Mort Vivant, which means undead. The article is a review of a book and a man who both do not seem to exist. The name is very popular and can be connected to a lot of figures throughout history, though. The review essentially doesn't say anything. It gives a few quotes on the top before going into another bunch of paragraphs about cadavers. The webpage has these ghostly figures as the background, but there isn't much I can ascertain beyond that. The next few articles here weren't interesting, but there was one about how to get your own hot vessel cadaver. In this article, Infect describes himself as a world-famous magician and the most diabolical Satanist to ever live. He attended an event for Satanists called the World Syncolizer Cartel Convention, which was held in 1903. This would place him somewhere in the hundreds for his age. After this, he claims that it is super easy to attain an HVC, as he's calling them. To get one, you just need to order one from this website. He doesn't say where on the site, just that they have them and they are available. He says they have a live streaming service as well on the website that displays snuff content for anyone interested. This also cannot be found on the website. Later on in this article, he gives a single link. This link led to nothing. I can assume it never led to anything. There aren't a bunch of cadavers being sold online, at least not to my knowledge. This is just more of the world building of the site. The next section is called the Necromemicon. A distorted image of death greets us as we click its link. Here we are met with this message. The message claims that the hosting site for the website has censored the largest satanic website, deathandhell.com. The reason given was for obscenity. From what I've seen so far, that's not too hard to believe. The most interesting part of this message, though, is the part at the bottom. Coincidentally, the site had previously been visited by none other than the United States Department of Defense in an investigation of Infek bin Laden. This was posted on the 28th of December 2000. The reason for the site being investigated is never given, and likely never will be. I couldn't find any corroborating details about whether it had or hadn't been visited by the DoD, but it's still interesting considering at least the name of the individual who created the website. If you click on the image, you'll end up here. One more click and we have a long poem to read. The poem talks of gods in despair and mentions a group called the Secret of the House of Set. This whole poem felt like it was written by someone else, and it was. At the bottom is the name Alice Cusack. This poem is the only thing on offer from this part of the website, which takes us back to the main page. The next section looks interesting, but it's no longer online. It was called D&H Chat Dungeon, most likely a chat room for any who visited the website. The service for the chat room is no longer active. I would have liked to see the conversations from users exploring this site back when it was active. I'll have to keep digging myself for that. The next section is the Death and Hell message board. Here you'll find messages posted to the website, but most of these aren't relevant to the site at all. There are a lot of unsolicited messages from scammer sites, trolls, and random conspiracy posts. I found a few mentions of people trying to also figure out what was going on with this site, and even discussing how you're supposed to understand it. One of the most interesting sections on the website was titled Liber neph theorum, which translates to Book of Evil in Latin. This section has a very gruesome looking cover. There are eyes everywhere on the book, a brain on the left, 4 inverted pentagrams, and 4 links to click. The first one has teeth and is titled The Second Death Accidents Will Happen. Going here leads to 6 articles and a few images that I can't show on YouTube. The articles all tell of different events that are important to the Latter-day Satanists. They also refer to the internet as a vast online urinal, which I guess makes sense. The next article is a quote from the Bible that is butchered using phrases from the website. It all ends with the site's name, deathandhell.com. The remainder of the posts don't have too much of interest for us, except for a mention of something called psychedelic Satanism. The only mentions I could find of it online were from this website and people trying to make connections between Satanism and psychedelic rock. A debate that has been ongoing since the 60s. We'll leave that thought on the back burner for now. Take a look at our next section. The section is titled differently, but you'll find more of the same here. There's an interesting section where Infek states all the titles he's carried. This shows the ones that we've heard before and a few that we haven't yet. This includes the Doctor from the passage before that we covered. It also lists his height as 5'11" to 6'6", so I'm assuming it's the former. This section also claims that he is wanted by the FBI for acts of terrorism against the Z-List. The Z-List is an occult group that exists online. They are where a lot of these posts on the website come from. Their connection we will explore more later. The next board is the most important on the entire website. This one is titled Infek bin Laden. Here we can get a peek behind the curtain for the man who created this website. There are a few sections to go through as well, including bio, art, and new and old photos. The first section, bio, has an important story that helped shape the beliefs of Infek. Around the age of 5, I was vacationing with my relatives south of Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Late one afternoon, I lost my plastic bucket and shovel in the surf and watched from the beach as they were swept out into the Atlantic. My mother called me home for supper, and I remember whining to my mom about the loss of my bucket and shovel. My grandmother said, "Don't worry, honey, I'll have it for you tomorrow morning." I wondered what she had in mind. I had heard that she was the 7th child of a 7th child, and I'd heard rumors of my grandmother's magical powers from my earliest memories. Later that evening, I must have forgotten about the bucket and shovel incident. I rose at dawn the next morning, excited to be the first one of the family awake and the first set of tracks on the beach. I ran down to the water's edge, and I'll never forget the intense beauty of the sun rising from the bottom of the sea. My tracks weren't the only tracks on the beach. One set of footprints headed north, and I could see someone walking from quite a distance. Far enough down the beach as to be an only indistinguishable figure. As I stood watching the sunrise, the lone figure approached. As soon as I recognized it was my grandmother, I ran to greet her. She was carrying the bucket and shovel. I knew they'd be there this morning, just like I promised you. From that moment on, I never doubted the power of magic. There's a strong shift in the writing of this website here. With everything else we've read, it seems like he was weaving a story of a world that Infect existed in. The world of sex magicians, OV, and cadavers. A place full of mixed messaging and hidden codes. Here though, Infect just talks to us. He tells us a story from his childhood. The whole thing is more coherent and well put together than most of the other places we've searched so far. This feels like the real person behind the site. The story itself is such a simple act. His grandmother retrieves his lost bucket. This was his first look into a world full of magic and wonder. A world that he would become increasingly more interested in. The next story, I believe, is the one that tells you everything you need to know about Infect. His life, his beliefs, and everything this website could mean are all wrapped up here. The first paragraph explains it all. He states that he doesn't find the thought of an afterlife to be very appealing, especially with the entertainment provided by HVCs and the like available in life. He much prefers the acts of astral vampirism and transmogrification, he says. This is the only reference to this site that we really get. From here, he goes deeply into a story that happened on the night that something tragic changed his life forever. On September 21st, 1977, he says that he spent time with a Native American Hispanic woman. During his time at her house, she and a few other women left to go do a tarot reading in the upstairs room of the house. He didn't feel comfortable doing it for some reason, so he stayed downstairs. The girl later came down crying and said a young girl would die in the house that night. And continued with that a young girl closely associated with someone in the house would die that night. This didn't sit right with him, but he waved it off as tarot wasn't so concise for readings. Later, while the pair were upstairs, the door to the room they were in randomly blew open. Infect felt odd but laughed and said, "It looks like a ghost just entered the room." As he said this, the girl looked scared beyond belief. He didn't stick around, grabbed his drugs, and left. While driving home, he was pulled over by a police officer. The officer took his license, read his name back to him, and then handed it back without another word. The officer then left him without even a warning for speeding. Seeing this as a sign of a gift, he left and continued home. He was supposed to meet up with his sister that day and also didn't want to worry his girlfriend. As he was driving by, he saw some ambulance lights. He was so desensitized to them at this point that he didn't even stop to look. The next day, he received a call from his younger sister. His other sister, Laura, was in a car accident the previous night. She didn't survive. This is when he realized that the ambulance that he had seen before was for her. This struck him harder than anything he'd ever had to deal with in his life. He was lost and couldn't think straight. He didn't attend the Christian funeral that his parents had put together for his sister, and instead set up a Tibetan Buddhist shrine for her. That's what she wanted, according to him. 2 weeks later, Infect went back to the house to see the girl again. He wanted answers about what they saw through the tarot cards. What he found was a vacant lot and a pile of ashes. The house had mysteriously burned down. The only time he'd ever see any of those women again was when he saw one in a crowd. She was gone before he could even approach her. He talks about how his sister approached his friend in a dream while he was dying. His friend was medically dead for a while on a table. She'd approached him in a field of flowers and said it wasn't his time yet. The friend was revived with mild brain damage, but otherwise survived his car accident. The final paragraph of this section reads, "My sister and I used to speculate about life after death all the time. When I was around 12 years old, my sister and I made a pact that whichever of us were the first to die, that we would do whatever we could to leave a sign for the other one. There's also a series of dreams and visions associated with this, which give it even more symbolic import. I seriously hope these experiences are just neurons misfiring. Otherwise, I'm going to have to pay for all my crimes against nature. If you are the first to go, leave a sign to let us know. Infect bin Laden, carry the lantern high." This is the most significant moment in Infect's life. The loss of his sister changed his perspective on a lot of things. This story does have a few oddities to it that make it hard to believe. Firstly, he was high on a multitude of things throughout his life. He even admits in this story to be high on cocaine and opioids while talking with the Native American woman. This, plus the house just being gone, makes this story more supernatural than historical sounding. I think regardless, this story shows us a lot of what Infect believes, what he was expecting out of life, and what he thought of the afterlife. The story again reads more personal than the other writings found on this website. The next section is called Draft Dodger, and it looks to be an email that is excluding him from the draft. From all of this, I think only the final paragraph is what really matters here. In summary, Charles Hiltzheimer has been a heavy user of hallucinogens at least over the last 3 years. This has seriously altered his capacity to perform in school or in situations where some acceptance of authority is required. After a year of psychotherapy in which no change in attitude to the drug scene occurred, the therapy was terminated. I feel that he is incapable of accepting a situation where self-discipline or other forms of discipline would be required. I do not feel he could adjust to military service due to his mental and emotional state. If he is drafted, I am sure he would break rules to such a degree that he would get either a medical or dishonorable discharge. I would strongly recommend he be disqualified from military service due to his use of hallucinogenic drugs and his behavior patterns. Yours, very truly, C. Glenn Clements, MD. Infect, Charlie, was a man who had been abusing drugs since he was a teenager. This adversely affected how he could handle many of life's challenges. This meant he wasn't fit to serve, which likely saved his life. In the 70s, the US was fighting in the Vietnam War, a war that saw many casualties. The rest of this page is dedicated to a letter that Lori had given him for his 18th birthday. It's a somber but happy read that shows that she cared for her brother a great deal. The art section held many interesting and diverse pieces, but the most interesting were the photo galleries. Here we can see Charlie, not Infect. We can see a bit of who he was and the life he led. He was a Grateful Dead fan, had a band, and was very heavily into martial arts. In several of the photos, the name changes beneath them. Sometimes I would refer to him as Infect, while other times I would refer to him as Charlie. The specific choices didn't seem to matter. There were also photos of family, friends, and his daughter. All of this was so far removed from what we saw on the face of the website. Going back to the rest of the website, it all feels different now. It's hard to understand most of the mentions of everything here, but some sense can be made. A few of the repeating words seem to point to different things. Hot Vessel Cadaver seems to be pointing to sex worker, while the inverse sex magician refers to the person paying them. This changes a lot of the context of the site. There's a section on how rough a magician should be with their HVCs. They seem to say that they are prone to violence more often than not. This could be referring a lot to the crimes that sex workers face, especially in the 70s and 80s. This includes serial killers who specifically targeted them. OV is a term that is thrown around a lot. I'm pretty sure it refers to love. This might be the most obvious or straightforward take, but it's used several times with the capital letters L and E at the end. There's also a phrase that replaces the word love with OV. This changes a few articles quite a bit as well. Although this assessment seems viable for a large chunk of stories posted on the website, it doesn't cover all of them. Sometimes there are just uses of these terms that don't make sense with what is being said. I assume that there are more instances of words being swapped out that mean things other than what's being said. Infect was a believer in occult practices, after all, and as such, look to how they coded their works. Several occult coding methods were used throughout history in many of their texts. One that I haven't mentioned yet is the cutting up technique. It's a method that was popularized by William S. Burroughs, a famous author. Those who have read his use of cutting up have mostly said that it was used to create artistic effect, while others claim it created muddled nonsense. The technique, as claimed by Burroughs, was never meant to be artistic, but instead imbue some kind of magic into the writing. Cutting up is a simple concept. You take a piece of paper, cut it along the lines, and rearrange it with others to create new sentences or paragraphs. This was used as a coding method in occult practices, mainly among chaos magic practitioners. This technique would gain a bit of notoriety and would even be used by David Bowie to an extent. This technique feels like it was used heavily across the site. This is because it was. On the first landing page that was written by Infect, he says that the site was created by cut-ups from Occulture, Flame Wars on the Z-List, his life, his world, and his email. Everything that we're reading and trying to examine comes from cut-ups of these discussions. In theory, you could try and piece everything together with the cut-up technique. You could also find out which words to replace. You could attempt to solve all of this, but what end would that bring? This website doesn't feel like it's meant to be solved or understood even. It was created by a man who saw the end of his life coming and wanted to memorialize himself and his interests. This of course is just my interpretation of it all. This website could secretly be an Illuminati conspiracy hiding in plain sight, just waiting for someone to crack its code. I don't think that's right though. I feel like it's just a man's artistic creation, one that seeks to troll the occult community a little bit. Give them something to revile as they think of themselves so highly. This isn't to say that Infect didn't believe in occultism, far from it, based on one section in particular. There's a section called Corpus Novo, or New Body. This section didn't read like the rest of the site at all. It even differentiates itself from the section where he wrote most candidly. This section is dedicated to several spells and occult practices that anyone interested could try. They are mostly practical and even tell a story from the author. Many different authors posted their spells here, including not just Infect. It covers many forms of magic that we've heard across many a fantasy novel: divination, evocation, enchantment, and sigils. It goes deeper even with psychic vampirism, sex magic, and servitors. There are also a few sections not on magic, including short stories, rants, poetry, and manifestos. There are hundreds of pages here to read through, so many in fact that it could take a person months to go through it all. The spells feel more like personal antidotes than actual magic. Most of them are people telling a story about something they believed and did. This is true regardless of the author I read. While exploring this part of the website, I noticed different aliases that Infect used. He was sometimes signing off with the name Infection, a clear play on the word infection. It was something I noticed on a few of his posts. This makes you think that this part of the website was done the earliest, or taken from somewhere else before being posted here. This, along with how differently it mostly reads, led me to this thought. HellAndDeath.com is such a unique website. It follows no rules and plays its own game. It exists as a place created by a man who saw the end in sight. The website had a lot to go through. I didn't even scratch the surface of what there is to see, really. There's so much I can go on forever about the sites I'm seeing and the worlds I'm exploring. But this is a place that I think others should see, that others should explore. It's an abandoned satanic website, at least on the surface. The further you go in, the more you can make your interpretations. It's a world of strange magic and people who want to have fun writing and exploring ideas. Still, a fair warning, a lot of the website is covered in grotesque imagery and it's not for everyone. If you do go exploring, let me know what you find. Maybe one day we'll all explore together and find what Infect always wanted us to see. Thank you friends for watching my newest video. DeathandHell.com was an interesting rabbit hole that I stumbled upon. This website has so much more to see, but we can only learn more together. A big thanks to my Patreon supporters. Without you, these videos wouldn't be possible. Thank you to Nora Kingsley, Icy Man, Ryoma, Austin Henshaw, and Miriam Reyes. Thank you to everyone who watched the video. I hope you all have a good night.